Andrea Stella believes that Mercedes and Ferrari are leading the pack. 3 days of testing are done here in Bahrain. Here are my takeaways and my thoughts from what we saw during testing. And I'll do a deeper dive podcast on Monday to really pull out some more things. But I just got back from the racetrack and just got done speaking with Andrea Stella. And I wanted to kind of download everything that was on the top of my mind now, and then we'll pick it apart and do something a little bit deeper on Monday. Maybe see what Nelson Vulkenberg's up to, or a couple other folks. Let's just jump right into the top four teams who I kind of see who are the top four teams, and that's got to be Mercedes. Start with them, because I do think they do have a tiny little bit of an advantage over Ferrari, but not much. They actually look a lot closer than what it actually appears. However, Mercedes did look strong on long runs. They did look strong on some of their push laps. Don't really know what type of fuel they're running either. So, that advantage could be much greater than, the one I'm thinking. But, from the eye test, it does look very, very close between those two teams. As for Ferrari, I thought they had an incredible day three. I think that is some of the strongest running I've seen from Ferrari in a test in quite a while. I mean, if you go back to 2025, it was a disaster for Ferrari. It wasn't a great test for them either, but they've arrived here for testing with this Spec A car that I talked about. More developments aggressively approaching for this car as well. Their engine, their power unit has done tons of mileage on it this past week. It did tons of mileage on it weeks prior as well. And for, the engine, they had an engine in there starting in Barcelona for the shakedown. And that same engine then did the first week of the Bahrain test. And then they swapped it out, and then they brought in a new engine for this week here in Bahrain, and it did a ton of laps. I mean, Charles Leclerc was out there all day today. It was a monster run from Charles Leclerc, and then once it got into the PM session, you had about an hour left. Then you started seeing Charles Leclerc really go to work and put in some performance runs to see where they actually were. Now, again, don't know what the fuel load situation looked like for them, but I did go trackside during those performance push laps, and car looked good. I mean, Leclerc did have a moment coming out of turn 11 as he was heading up to turn 12, and he had to scrap one of his push laps. And it just looks like the car needs a tiny bit more downforce, especially on the rear. As when he's going back to power, the rear of the Ferrari is a little lively because of all of the torque that is coming through the rear of the car from the energy from the battery power. And so maybe that's some of the things that they're going to be working on. Maybe those are going to be some of the updates that they will be bringing to this car. But they have to be extremely happy with how their testing went, I feel. And I also think that, this car is going to take some pretty big steps. So is their power unit. Their standing starts are amazing. They're the best in the class right now for standing starts. We're not seeing like these standing starts that we were seeing on Thursday morning, Thursday evening, Friday morning, Friday evening. These standing starts, the drivers aren't giving it 100%. I believe that these drivers are still holding back in these standing starts as well, but you still get a sense for sort of where everyone is when it comes to that as well, given that these drivers are, I think, still holding back some in the standing starts. Then Ferrari's holding back as well, and they're still, look like they're being shot out of a cannon. So if I'm Mercedes, I'm a little worried about that, because if you're Mercedes and you have that tiny bit of advantage, or maybe even a greater advantage, yeah, sure, you're going to qualify on pole. But what happens when Ferrari qualifies third, or even second or fourth? I mean, that thing's going to be like a rocket ship. You're definitely going to get Ferrari power at the head of the field in Australia, maybe if the starts are good enough for them, because they look incredible. So does the Haas, and obviously the Haas is running Ferrari power, but they're a perfect example. The Haas was starting at the back of the field, not at the back of the grid, but they were at the back of the field for the final start in Friday's PM session, and that car made up like a handful of positions before turn one. Like, it was pretty remarkable to see what that Haas could do. So I do genuinely believe that Ferrari does have an advantage there with the starts for sure. Also good to see classic just ingenuity from Ferrari engineers with that rotating rear wing that I spoke about on the last show. I see a bit of a gap, and then I see McLaren. For McLaren, they fascinate me because standing trackside and watching them, their downshifts look great. The gearbox sounds amazing. I think they've got the best gearbox on the grid in McLaren. And seeing them come out of corners, car looks very responsive. The front end looks very responsive. Power down looks very stable. Lando Norris is a very smooth driver, and so is Oscar Piastri. And I think that their right foot and how they put the power down is definitely going to help them, because I can just see them just as how smooth they are with the car. That's definitely going to help them throughout the season because of how much torque again is coming through the drivetrain in the rear of these race cars. But they look good. They look really good. Obviously, running the Mercedes power unit, had a good test as well. Banged out a ton of laps at the same time. And I think moving forward, and like Andrea Stella had told us and has been telling us, is the fact that they still need to add updates. They still need to bring performance to this car. They still need to bring downforce to this car. So the car that we're seeing, it's going to evolve. It's going to evolve quickly too. So yeah, I can see McLaren taking big steps throughout this season at the same time. And then I got Red Bull right behind McLaren. I thought Red Bull had a really decent test. Simply put, that powertrain that they had, I didn't have a ton of confidence in it when they were building it. And then when I sat down and spoke with Laurent Mekies in January in Detroit at the car launch, he didn't seem too confident about it either. And sounded like it was going to be a work in progress, which it probably is, but they have to be happy with the amount of mileage that they were able to put into that Red Bull Ford powertrain. Very impressive from Red Bull. And I think, yes, do they have some advantages? Sure. I mean, all teams have their advantages and disadvantages with this new regulation. Theirs could be deployment, like Toto Wolff had mentioned last week. Yes, they could be looking pretty solid when it comes to the deployment side of things. I'll have to wait and see how that sort of shakes out. I think they're going to have tracks that are going to be their strengths. I think they're going to go to tracks where they're going to have weaknesses. And that's where I see a big gap. And then a really big gap to, Haas, Alpine, Audi. They all kind of seem sort of in the mix. I think Audi's probably a little bit further back, and I think it's closer between Haas and Alpine. I was watching Pierre Gasly come through today. I was standing at turn 11. And I like standing at turn 11 because you're seeing that medium to high speed ish sort of corner, and it's a quick downshift, quick to get the car into the corner. You got to get back to the power, and you can really see that if the rear end squats down. And for the Alpine, it does look like they need a little more rear end stability. And I would say that some updates are going to need to be required. I mean, updates are going to be required all season, but I think some for the rear to try and get a little bit more downforce on the rear of the car for those medium to high speed sections. But that being said, it looked good through turn 10. I was watching the Alpine come through turn 10, which is a very low speed hairpin turn. And I was watching them come through yesterday trackside during their morning session, and it does look pretty handy. Not as smooth as the Mercedes or the McLaren, and the car needs to be refined, but I'm actually quite impressed with Alpine. And like I said on here, I do think they got a little something in there, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to keep up with Haas. Remember that Haas doesn't have a huge budget either, right? Like, they are an underfunded team, let's be honest. But Io Komatsu has this team firing on all cylinders, if you will. Like, they have come to testing, cranked out the basics, get your meat and potatoes into you, get them out of the way, and then start into the dessert, so to speak. And I think with this week here at Bahrain in testing they've been so solid. Just cranking out great mileage. The car looks stable. Both drivers look really handy with this thing too. And I thought that maybe Esteban Ocon may struggle a bit with this regulation, but so far, actually, I think he's looked pretty good. And Behrman, solid driver. I mean, he's been great. Yeah, pretty impressed with Haas. That's for sure, and that's where I sort of see them. And then you've got Audi in there as well, a little bit behind. And then Williams. No, Williams really struggled. Obviously, getting the car to the track for the first week of testing was monumental effort by the team, but it looks not great. I mean, it's not as bad as like Aston Martin, but it doesn't look fantastic for Williams. I'm kind of trying to figure out where to sort of put them. If I go with Williams, then Cadillac. I mean, that's kind of where I'm leaning at the moment. But granted, it looks heavy. Let's just be honest. That car does look overweight. I mean, James Vowles has been pretty upfront about that, but still, the car does look heavy, and I wonder how that's going to. I wonder how that'll affect them. I really do, because I think Racing Bulls is just ahead of Williams, and then I think it's like Williams, sort of Cadillac. Cadillac's super impressive, even though they didn't crank out a ton of laps. I still think that what Cadillac has been able to achieve to get this car to the grid has been extremely impressive. And then Sergio Perez had like 61 laps on day 3. And I would say for them, that's really good. Just considering the amount of work that's gone into getting this car to the track. I mean, Bottas was about 38 laps today as well, which was good. I mean, they had some teething issues, had some problems here or there, but it's a solid operation. They've done a good job. Everything through that team. Again, just getting the basics, getting that dialed in, getting the team prepped, doing your pit stops, working that. Because by the time they get to Australia, they're not going to be working on one car anymore. They're going to be working on 2, right? So things are going to go to another level for Cadillac for sure, just with 2 cars then, instead of just working with one. But that being said, I think Cadillac could surprise some people this season, and I'm excited to see their journey and what they end up doing. We have to talk about Aston Martin. Obviously, I mean, it's, there was a lot of expectation, a lot of high hopes, coming out of last season, and getting to the track. I mean, it's just been, I think, pretty devastating for the team to see exactly what they have right now. I mean, if we kind of go through this in a chronological way, You go back to when these 2026 regulations came up with, um, Honda getting involved with them late, and then the deal being done between Aston Martin and Honda, and Honda not really having built out a new power unit in quite some time, doing away with, I think, a lot of the group that was involved in building out that power unit for Red Bull back in the day, especially the one that helped them win the championship in 2021. Um, yeah, I think they've left it too late, and by leaving it too late, they've become unprepared. They've had a lot of issues with the power unit. I mean, they didn't even do a full race simulation on Thursday. They tried. They never really completed a full race simulation. They tried to do one with Fernando, but the thing broke down. Car broke down. And because it broke down, they were worried about spare parts for the power unit. And so Lance only got to do 6 laps on Friday, a bunch of installation laps, couldn't run at full power because I don't think they have the parts if the engine starts breaking down, because they're packing everything up and sending it to Australia now. So for Honda, that's sort of where they're at. And then you look at the gearbox for Aston Martin. That's the first time Aston Martin's ever built a gearbox. Now, granted, when this team was Force India, they built gearboxes back in 2008, but a lot of people who were building that are now gone. Like, they're not there, right? They haven't built a gearbox in forever. And so that's going to be a huge thing for them, because the gearbox and the engine and the power unit, they all have to work so well together, because drivers are using the gearbox quite aggressively to recapture and harvest energy and dump it into the battery. And if it's not working, like, that's a key element that you're missing out on trying to regen the battery. So that needs a lot of work as well. The handling of the car, it looks awkward. I think there's going to be some definite refinement that has to happen with the car as well. I know Adrian Newey had said that this is a car that's going to need some evolution, and there will be big components coming for it. But the thing is that the car and the engine have to work together. You have to limit the amount of drag so you can try and be fast in a straight line. And so there's a lot of work for Aston Martin to tackle. The thing with the engine rules and regulations, so if let's say Aston Martin is still struggling with the engine, because they need to be homologated. But if they're still struggling with the engine by race 6 or after race 6, let's say they're 2% behind everybody, then the FIA will waive the time on the dyno so they can use the dyno more, and also waive a lot of the cost cap stuff so they can start spending more money on the power unit to try and get it competitive as fast as possible. Well, that's not until like after race 6. And so I think that Aston Martin will start putting those requests in way earlier to try and make sure that by race 6 Honda can start to get really deep into the engine and spend a lot of time on the dyno, spend some money on trying to get it right. And so they have a lot of work to do. Honda has a lot of work to do on that side, I guess, when you look at this thing, it's a disappointment. It's unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, I think Australia is going to be really tough for this team. Really tough. Really, really tough. So we'll have to wait and see how it plays out and see exactly where they are in terms of performance. But again, not being able to rattle off race simulation, I mean, you don't really know if the car can go the distance through a Grand Prix either. So see what happens with Aston Martin in Australia. So those are just my quick thoughts on everything. We'll dig into this a little bit deeper. I kind of want to go a little deeper on Monday and sort of pick the bones out of this thing. But I wanted to make sure I got on here and got you all something as quick as I could. It's 10:55 p.m. here in Bahrain. I got to get up at 6 a.m., got a flight back to Toronto, and start working and prepping for the Australian Grand Prix. I'm going to have some great sit-down interviews that I got to do while here in Bahrain. You'll see those on TSN as we do our lead-in coverage to the Australian Grand Prix, which is just a few weeks away. I think the start of this race is going to be chaos. And I think it is going to be a year. It's going to be an exciting year. Again, we don't really know what the racing is going to look like out on the track. We just don't know. We just don't know. So save judgment on what the racing looks like until we see what everything plays out as in Australia. And we'll unpack a little bit more of that as we get through the next few weeks. But yeah, everyone have a great weekend, or the rest of your weekend. Taping this on a Friday night. Hopefully you guys will get this Friday night back in Canada and in North America. And so yeah, thanks very much everyone for being with me on this testing journey. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, these are just random streams of thoughts that I just come in here and I hit record and I just start blathering everything in. And yeah, hopefully it's been good. That's all I got to say. But I'll be back on Monday. We'll talk to you all then.